believe that
dealing with warm-up techniques is, as you can see, not exactly what we're going to have to be dealing with. I can talk about and share with you some ideas that I think will cover everybody, and that no matter what your specific warm-up exercises may be, for instance, there are things that can overlay over everything, and things that I think you really need to know about. I have been away from Ball State now for 20 years, and all during that time I've been involved with professional music. I didn't go off to New York and become a waiter to support myself while I found jobs. I decided to go to New York and always be a singer, lest I lose track of what my duty was there, why I came to New York. I'm not saying that you have to do that. There are people who go to New York or wherever they go to further their singing career or their instrumental career and decide that the best way to do it is to never take a job that they feel is beneath them. For instance, a choral job. If they're a soloist, they don't want to go take a choral job. So they'll wait tables and study until the right job comes along. My feeling was when I went to New York that to take a job waiting tables diverted my attention from what my real task was. And so I took all kinds of singing jobs, but I only took singing jobs. I sang in the chorus of this and that and the next thing, and Tommy Pyle's Roving Chorus, which had every name of chorus in New York. Every chorus in New York was the same group of people, they just had a different name. I sang in a synagogue. I sang in churches. I got one of my early jobs in New York was singing at Grossinger's for the High Holy Days, and the man that hired me, Sam, his last name shall go unnamed, he heard me sing, and of course I was singing as a tenor then, and tenors are always a little bit difficult to find, and he hired me, and he says, you know, of course that when we get up there you'll have to wear a yarmulke, the small hat that is worn by the Jewish in the holidays especially. And he says, that won't bother. No, we'll stay there, you'll get your food. It was only $100. We were there for 4 or 5 days, but we got to eat at Grossinger's, which is pretty good, as you may or may not know. So we got up there, and after the first meal, when we'd gotten up there in the evening, he said, now I want you to know, he's talking to the chorus, all of you are free to use the facilities here whenever you want to. There's the golf course and the tennis courts and the swimming pool, and he flashed by me while he said swimming pool. And he looked at me briefly, and he had the worried look flash across his face, and from then on you could tell he'd lost his concentration. So he says, well, look, go on out there, and he says, Mr. Trussel, can I see you before we leave? And so I walked up. I was wrong. Of course, we all have a little paranoia in new jobs. I thought, oh my gosh, I've mispronounced some Jewish word or something. And he said, look, he says, Jack, he says, you know, you're welcome to use all the facilities here. He says, golf course with swimming. He says, are you something? I said, what? I'm sorry. I said, what? Are you circumcised? I said, oh, yeah. He said, oh, good. He says, yeah, he says, use all the facilities. He says, it's fine. And so I made my living in all kinds of ways, but always singing.
Underwater tenor.
Yeah. Yes, Jacques Trussel, famous underwater tenor. Anyway, I don't know how he got off on that story. There are, in fact, all kinds of things that we can talk about that more or less relate to the subject, and so let's talk about them. Number one, the business of warming up. Vocal mechanism, the business of singing, is a muscular coordination. All right? it's a part of the entire body and involves the group of muscles obviously around the throat, and obviously the intercostals and all the muscles in the upper body. And some teachers will go further and say that it involves the entire body. And I believe that singing does involve the entire body to such an extent that warming up these muscles around the voice just simply isn't enough. I don't have to tell many of you that are singers that if you get up early in the morning and you have to go do your church job, and your church job is at 9 o'clock, or they have an early service at 8 o'clock, and you have to be there for a 7:30 rehearsal or an 8 o'clock rehearsal, that when you get up in the morning, it's pretty tough to croak out those first few notes. And you can warm up all you want to, and somehow morning time just doesn't seem like the time to sing, okay? And the reason is not because you haven't given enough attention to your voice, it's because you haven't given enough attention to your body. The body simply has to get going before this can get going. You cannot expect your car to go down the block until you've started the engine, okay? So everything needs to be warmed up. There are all kinds of ways to do that, and each of you have to find your own way. But certainly the general health of you as an individual counts for much in the business of singing and living. And I really feel strongly about your being in good condition from the standpoint of a cardiovascular way and an aerobic kind of way, and from the standpoint of what food you put in your body way. The American diet is not great by any means, and from what I've seen, the American college diet may be even worse. I could sit here and give us a lecture on diet. I'm not going to do that. Later on, I am going to talk about some foods not to eat and some foods to eat in regards to your everyday vocal health, and especially as you get toward performances, or especially if you feel you're coming down with a cold, or if maybe you even have started a cold or a sore throat. And I'll touch on that later on as we continue to talk. But let's get back to the business of being warmed up. Really, you must develop for yourselves some kind of exercise program. Don't wait until you got a concert 3 days away and decide that you're going to warm up, that you're going to exercise. It just doesn't work. One of the things that someone said in a church that I go to in New York, they said that the reason Christ was able to deal with the problems of the crucifixion and the problems of the last days leading up to that is because he was prepared. Christ didn't just go up there and say, okay, I'm ready, now I'll go through my meditation. Let me see how I get this together right now, see? He was ready. And you can't just come up on the day of the performance and say, oh, today's the performance, I guess I'll do my exercises. As a matter of fact, the day of the performance is when you should leave that kind of exercising to a minimum, because you should be prepared, okay? You should be ready already. So develop some kind of system for yourselves. I do a thing every morning called do-in. It's a Japanese kind of acupressure. It's called do-in because you do it to yourself. It consists of stretches and using certain acupressure points on your body to massage your body. It starts out with different wrist things, and it has to do with just getting those points released and getting the energy going through your body and massaging just parts of your body. And I do it before I ever get out of bed. All kinds of stretches and movements, and just lying in bed to get my body energized. When I get out, I go through another set of just stretches, just to get things moved out. Now, here again, if I go through this, we'll spend the whole time just dealing with exercises. You have to develop this for your own. You have to find out what feels good for you. But certainly, it's the most important part of getting ready to sing. I know some choral groups, especially high school groups, that turn around and massage each other's backs and do it. And it's a really good thing. You've got to get the blood going. This whole system of muscles, if you know anything about muscular activity. Some of you may be runners. I talked to someone in an interview yesterday who was a runner. We got talking about the problems of involving the need for sugar to the muscles when you're singing. Because it's a muscular activity, the voice builds up a certain amount of lactic acid as you're singing, as you're using these muscles. And the oxygen has to come in there and cart this stuff away. There has to be a resupply of sugar that goes to the muscles. The oxygen comes in and burns the sugar and creates the ability for the muscle to keep active, to keep elastic, and to keep working the way it needs to work in order to sing this truly kind of athletic business of singing. And especially if you're into opera, where you're required to sing a much higher and longer range, much more breath involved, much more stamina involved over a 3 and 3.5 hour evening, you got to have yourself in good shape and know how this activity begins to work for you. So, as you can see, I hope by this time, you must find a way to get your body and everything going. One of the things that, besides just using this business of turning around and doing each other's shoulders, the adrenals, one of the adrenal points is right in here, the back next to the spine, and all along in here. One of the things you can do is bend over if you got a partner and just have them pound on that part. You can do it yourself. I do it every morning. But just pound on that part of your back, and you really get the adrenals moving. If you just do that for a minute, all of a sudden you feel a kind of new surge going on. So, we get into, you can get into the physical side of singing, which we've now talked about, just getting to the warm-up of the voice. Then you should be ready to start working on the business of warming up the voice. The first and foremost and key word to warming up the instrument is be gentle. Don't bang on it. Don't pound on it. Okay? It deserves better. Okay? Here again we could go into the reasons why, but I hope you can begin to see that already. Warm up, if you're starting in the morning to warm up, for instance, warm up in bits and pieces. You don't have to warm up all at once. It's better not to warm up. Warm up the middle of the voice. Get down there where your speaking sound is. Okay? Warm up that area of the voice. Be gentle with it. And one of the ways to be gentle is to be gentle with your breathing. I talked a little bit about this yesterday, but if you are breathing this way, immediately, just try that for me. Just everybody take a quick breath and put your hand around your throat, just like that. You can see what happens to the muscles around the neck. They immediately extend. And you can feel a tension involved in that kind of breathing. Always remember that the larynx is directly in the brain attached to the diaphragm. And if you'll breathe slowly, put your hand on your larynx right here, right around the larynx, and take a nice slow breath to the diaphragm, and you can feel the larynx drop. If you'll open your mouth very gently and breathe to the diaphragm, you'll feel the larynx drop. Now that activity is because of the diaphragm moving down to allow the air to come in. It's directly in the brain attached to this movement right here, as opposed to a high breath, quick catch breath, which is going to get these muscles all tightened up. Okay? So be gentle. And the first part of being gentle starts with that nice slow breath. Okay? Learn to breathe slowly. Learn to attack the note gently. Breath. I don't know how many times already I've walked by a practice room in here and heard people going, ah, ah, ah. I mean, you're just beating the chords together every time. I've watched my chords on a television screen. They have these laryngoscopes that they put through your nose, and they have a camera that goes right down into the throat. And done experiments with Dr. Van Lawrence in Houston, who writes a column in the Nats magazine. And we did all kinds of things where I watched what happened. And if going, is almost the same thing as going, the chords just bang together. You can see them slapping together. So be gentle. Be gentle with your voice. Also, if you've sung the day before, one of the things that has to happen is there's been a buildup of this lactic acid that stayed on the chords. And you want to get rid of that. So you want to sing for long enough just to move that off the chords. Just the way a runner would warm up in the morning before he runs. You see him out there stretching and moving. All that's to get the blood to the muscle and to take and carry away the lactic acid so that a new supply of sugar can come into the muscle and it'll be ready to use and it's fresh. See what I mean? So, start your warm-ups gently. Warm up the middle of the voice. Warm it up on all the vowels, unless it's a vowel that's giving you trouble. And stay away from it. Let your teacher deal with that. It's really important. You see, people tend to go in and just work on trouble spots. All right, the high note is bothering me, okay? So they go in and they practice a high note for a half hour. You think it's bothering you before you went in. It'll really be bothering you when you come out. Don't practice wrong things. One of the things that Heifetz said, someone asked him in an interview, you were obviously one of the great violinists of the world, whoever has been. What do you attribute this greatness to, aside from the obvious fact that you have a God-given talent which you used wisely? And he said, the most important single thing owing to my being able to play the way I do is that my father, who was my teacher, never let me practice without him. He took my violin away from me and put it up where I couldn't reach it. So that when he was gone, I couldn't get to it. I couldn't break the rule. I only practiced when he was there. So I always practiced right. I only practiced right things. Don't run off and practice wrong things. Now, if there are trouble spots, your teachers worked with you and said, this is how to approach this, let's work on it. That's different, okay? But if blatantly you have no approach to it, don't go off and try to just bang on it, because it won't work. Give yourself a break. Practice the things you know. Get those into your system so those are taken care of. Let your teacher and you help solve the things that aren't. When you have an approach to it, then go work on it, okay? Don't bang on it. After you've done your first practice session, let's say it's 10 minutes. You can do it at home. You can do it in the shower. I love to do, people talk about singing in the shower and how wonderful it sounds. It does sound, you know, there's nothing but hard surfaces in there. The other thing about doing it in the shower, practicing in the shower, is that there's all that steam floating around. And in the morning, it just really feels good to help lift the junk off your throat, you know? You're going real easy and get a few things done right in the middle of voice, and leave it alone. Let yourself take a break. Come to school or whatever it is, go to the practice room, do the same set of exercises, and then expound on it. Then take it up a little higher, then move it. Don't get into the passaggio yet, you're not ready for it. After you've done that a couple times, then go for it a third time and start to put it up in the passaggio. Then start to take a few high notes and do things like that. Okay? That's really about, for right now, all I'm going to say about what you need to do and what you can do, even with any of your techniques, about the business of working with the throat. Okay? How long does this last? Okay. So, good, we're moving on anyway. The other things that are involved in singing are multitudinous, aside from warming up the body and the throat. Okay? There are all kinds of things that are involved with what you need to do and what's going to be your problems in singing. Probably the most single important thing about singing has to do with not the body, but with this up here, with your mind. It just absolutely can run what your voice is about. Okay? Let's talk about affirmations for a minute. if you've gotten yourself into a spot, one of the reasons why you don't want to bang on high notes is what I'm about to talk about. You bang on that high note and you bang on it, and finally you just never get it, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and you get a thing about it. You can't sing that note. All of a sudden you're going around and say, this aria is going to be great except for that C at the end. I can't sing that C. I can't, geez, and it plagues you, and all of a sudden, you're into this, I can't do it. You are affirming a very negative thing for yourself. You are affirming the can't. Okay? You're going around giving yourself this message. Now believe me, folks, the mind is the center of all of this. And unfortunately, the unconscious can't take a joke. All right? It just doesn't know. If you say, can't, it sits there going, it's your computer, all right? It is your body computer. It gets going, can't. Okay. I can't. I got it. You computed it. It's in the computer. I got it. It can't be done. So, I'll bet you anything, when you get there, the computer takes over and goes, ah! You computed me to do that. That's the way it is.